Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
Comey and Admiral Rogers from the National Security Agency are answering questions from the Democrats. I'll get into that in just a second, as the specific questions, because what's really going on there, I find fascinating. Now, a lot of people, I'm getting emails saying a lot of people down in the dumps, depressed, maybe not panicking, but a little bit concerned at all this. And I'm going to try to rein everybody back in and explain what's really going on. I can't deny, however, I'm not going to try to sugarcoat the overall picture here, which is a president under constant assault is illegitimate and unjust. I mean, that's the picture that's being painted. That is the narrative that will not go away, and they are attempting to intensify it each and every day. Now, somebody like me, super informed, well aware, totally informed on the techniques of the left, to me, this effort is flailing. But I'm not the average voter, and I'm not the average person paying attention who's going to see the headlines from this. For example, the never-Trumpers are orgasmic today. The never-Trumpers on both sides of the aisle, Republican, conservative never-Trumpers, leftist, Democrat, drive-by media never-Trumpers, are orgasmic over this. Comey admitted, big show and tell. In fact, let me quickly, grab audio soundbite number one. This statement by Comey at the beginning of the congressional hearings today, House Intelligence Committee hearings, this statement has the never-Trumpers in an unchecked bout of orgasmic happiness.
As you know, our practice is not to confirm the existence of ongoing investigations, especially those investigations that involve classified matters. But in unusual circumstances, where it is in the public interest, it may be appropriate to do so, as Justice Department policies recognize. This is one of those circumstances. I have been authorized by the Department of Justice to confirm that the FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. And that includes investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts.
Now, this is something I don't know about you, but I've assumed that this has been going on all along. But this announcement today, making it official that there is an investigation, has these people just ecstatic. They cannot contain themselves. I mean, the never-Trumpers, wherever you find them, they think that is one nail in the coffin. Comey just now, just prior to the program beginning, and I didn't hear this. You know, at some point I have to get up out of this chair and go do stuff. And it just so happened when I came back, all I saw was a crawl at the bottom of the screen. Comey apparently said to somebody, Russians wanted to hurt democracy, hurt Clinton, and help Trump. That statement is a political statement, and it is made by the director of the FBI in the context of intelligence gathering. That is one heck of a statement. Russians wanted to hurt democracy, hurt Clinton, and help Trump. Then how did Hillary end up winning the popular vote? Earlier on today, the Democrats, led by their chairman Adam Schiff, asked. Well, no, the Democrats did not ask this. In fact, this was Devin Nunes. Any evidence that the Russians tampered with the votes? Comey, no. Rogers, NSA, no. Any evidence the Russians tried to tamper with the outcome of the votes? Ballots, no. Any attempt made by the Russians? No, we're not aware of any attempt. That should have ended the hearings. But it didn't. Both Comey and the director of the NSA have said there was no effort. There is no evidence of any kind that the Russians had anything to do with the counting of votes or the casting of votes in the 2016 election. And if that's the case, there's no there there. But that's not what this is about. This is not about the evidence. This is not about certainly any exculpatory evidence. This is about furthering the narrative that Trump's election is illegitimate. And this is designed to move forward whatever efforts there are that we don't know about yet to impeach Trump and to get rid of him. That's what this is all about today. And there's a secondary thing that this is about. And I'll give you detail, and this as the program unfolds. But I've watched the questioning from Adam Schiff, the Democrat chairman, and I've been unable to contain my laughter. Can I give you examples of his questions? He's asking Comey, he's asking the NSA guy, Admiral Rogers, do you know Paul Manafort? Do you know that Paul Manafort knows Roger Stone? Well, do you know that Roger Stone tweeted back on September the 13th that he was going to go to Russia and that he was going to sleep in a hotel? Well, do you know that Manafort and Stone talked on the phone 10 times? Did the NSA analyze whether the hack of the DNC affected the way people voted? No. Sorry, Senator, can't comment on that. It's beyond the scope of our investigation. Can you tell our Democrat voters that your investigation's still in the early phases and that you have a long way to go? Can't comment on investigations. Wait a minute, you did with Hillary. How long are your investigations? Well, there's no set time limit, Congresswoman. The investigations will go on as long as we want them to go. She smiled and said, good. Can you tell me, this is another question, can you tell me about the process to prove that Trump cheated? No, I can't tell you about our investigative process. Okay. She didn't actually say the process to prove Trump cheated. That's implied. What is happening here is that the Democrats on this committee are servicing their base. Their base voters are insane. I have a story here today about how they're having nightmares, they're unable to sleep, they're seeking therapy. The Democrat base, because of this irresponsible reporting that Trump and the Russians worked together to screw the election and screw Hillary, figuratively speaking. That story has been out there since last summer. That story has been fueled and built and expanded to the point that the Democrat base believes it to be true. There isn't any evidence. James Clapper worked for Clinton. Paul Morelli, the CIA director agent that worked for Hillary, came out last week and said there's nothing there. There is no evidence of any kind of any collusion. And there isn't, because there wasn't any. And I can give you some questions. I can ask you some questions to kind of make the point, too, in a common sense way. But that's not the point. The point is that the Democrats and the media have so stoked this story that their base believes it. And the Democrats on this committee and the Democrats in the Senate, the Democrats everywhere are literally scared to death of the day when it will be officially announced that there was no collusion, when this Comey investigation ends and they can't prove any collusion between Trump and the Russians. They are scared to death of that day, of what their base is going to do. They need their base continuing to donate money. They need their base continuing to remain engaged. And they have used this story that Trump colluded with the Russians to steal the election. They have used this story to excuse the fact that they lost. They have used this story to excuse the fact that they had a lousy candidate, to excuse the fact that she ran a lousy campaign, to excuse the fact that she's very unlikable, to excuse the fact that they were so arrogant and condescending and assuming they were going to win that they didn't even really make a serious effort. All of that has to be covered up. There is no way, in fact, that they could have lost unless the election was stolen from them. And so this narrative has been out there, and it has been fed. The New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN have fed it with stories of wiretapping and any number of things to indicate that Trump was under investigation and that evidence was being accrued and that evidence was being filed. There isn't any evidence. The Democrat base voter has essentially been told a humongous lie. I don't think when this all started it ever was intended to get this big, but it kept feeding on itself, and now they've got nowhere to go. There's even a story, Glenn Greenwald, who is a friend of Snowden's and worked with him on his story, and is a left-wing journalist, has a website called The Intercept. And he published a massive story yesterday about just this very fact, that there is no evidence and that the Democrats, elected Democrats, are scared to death over the fact this has gotten so big that expectations have been raised so high and that there isn't any evidence for it. So these questions, such as, do you know Paul Manafort? Did you hear what Donald Trump tweeted on December 19th? Did you read what Donald Trump tweeted in January? All of these meaningless questions. They're just simply reading Democrat talking points. They're taking quotes from the New York Times and the Washington Post and asking these quotes as questions to Comey and the NSA guy. And Comey and the NSA go, well, I can't comment. We never comment on things in the media. It doesn't matter what the answers are. The questions are designed to have the Democrat rabid and lunatic base out there standing up and cheering. Yeah, you tell them, you tell them. Because there is a palpable fear on the Democrat side that there's nothing here and that there won't be anything found. Not legitimately. The way this is going, though, I don't know what you call legitimate and illegitimate anymore. You just don't know where this is. This has gotten so big, and folks, it's so out of hand now. There are so many reputations tied up in this bogus theory that Trump and the Russians work together to hack and steal the election. There are political careers hanging on this one. And when that's the case, all bets are off as to who is going to end up saying and doing what. Because it's gotten much, much bigger than anybody ever intended. And that's because the people behind this are completely and totally irresponsible. They have been gobsmacked. They simply cannot deal with the fact that they lost the election. And then you add that Trump won it. It's just it's unacceptable. It's a nightmare. It's surreal to them. This is none of this is happening. It's impossible to lose an election to Donald Trump. It's impossible. It's impossible. Hillary Clinton could lose an election to anybody, but to Donald Trump, oh my God, it's even worse. So there has to be something to explain it, and that's what all this is about. James Comey also said something. I'm doing a little scattershot here, and it'll come back in the break. I'm going to go through this in order, but I want to get it out all on the table before I forget it. Comey said something interesting today that nobody's picked up on yet because they're so distracted by this other stuff, which I can understand. He was asked specifically if WikiLeaks was furnished their information on Podesta, the phone calls by the Russians, and Comey said no. Well, now everybody on the Democrat side believes that the Russians gave Assange and WikiLeaks everything they hacked. Again, I want to remind everybody, this is the truth of this has not been mentioned yet. Podesta was not hacked. Podesta fell for a phishing scam. Now, you might, on a loose definition, call it a hack, but it's not a hack in the sense that you and I think of hacks. Nobody got into into Podesta's computer. He let them in. He invited them in unknowingly. Russia did not deal directly with WikiLeaks, Comey said. They had a cutout, which is an intermediary. Well, who was that? WikiLeaks has insisted that they didn't get anything from Russia, that Russia was not their source, and Comey confirmed that today. I expect later on today somebody will realize Comey said this and they'll mention it, make something of it. But it is astounding to me to watch this, because it's now gotten, when I say out of control, it means the story has gone beyond anybody's ability to control it now, and it has its own inertia, and it has an outcome that has to happen in order to save some political careers. And that outcome is that Trump and Russia colluded. They have built these expectations up so high, and there isn't any evidence, and there never has been any evidence. But I'd like to know who initiated the FBI's investigation of Trump. We've been hearing all along that there is one. Who initiated that, and why? When did it begin? Any Obama holdovers involved in this? Any Obama embeds in the bureaucracy involved in this? What about Clinton campaign members meeting with Russians? Is any of that being investigated? We know that a lot of people that work for the Democrats met with Russians. We know that Bill Clinton worked with a guy in Canada to basically sell, to the point where the Clintons profited, a great portion of the U.S. uranium supply. What about coordination between CNN and Hillary Clinton? What about the Democrat National Committee rigging their primary against Bernie Sanders? Is there any investigation of that? What about the investigation of the Clinton Foundation? We're told that there was one. Well, we don't know. Nobody's officially said so. Influence peddling to foreign countries. Obama's ransom payments to Iran. The one-sidedness of this is striking. Now, it's early on in the hearings, and I'm going to say something here that may be a little bit premature, and it's only based on what I have seen, but there hasn't been, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Sturdley, there hasn't been, aside from Trey Gowdy, there hasn't been a whole lot of pushback on much of this from the Republicans. There's been some, but not as much as you would expect. We'll have more in a minute here. Whether he is or is not investigating the president. What does that mean? Grassley just tweeted this within the last half hour, and apparently, if I'm judging this the way a normal person would, Grassley's watching Comey and thinks Comey's saying something different than what he told him. Apparently, Grassley says that Comey told him something about whether or not the FBI is investigating the president that differs from what Comey said today. Comey also, get this, says that he launched the FBI investigation of Trump and Russia in July. July? That's before Trump even had the nomination. Why were the Russians helping Trump when he might not even be the nominee? This is getting even screwier by the minute as things continue to unfold here. Hang on, folks. Back in a minute. Under questioning from Republican Mike Conaway from Texas. As of early December 2016, the FBI assessed that the active measures conducted against Secretary Clinton were to denigrate her, were to hurt her campaign, and to undermine her presidency. This is, again, he's reminding Comey that the FBI assessed in December of 2016, after the election, that active measures conducted against Hillary Clinton were to denigrate her, to hurt her campaign, and undermine her presidency, and a conclusion that active measures were taken specifically to help Trump's campaign. You had that by early December. You had that conclusion. Is that correct?
Correct. That they wanted to hurt our democracy, hurt her, help him. I think all three we were confident in at least as early as December. Putin hated Secretary Clinton so much that the flip side of that coin was he had a clear preference for the person running against the person he hated so much.
This is an incredible bit of news from the FBI director. Okay, now, there's an ongoing investigation. I'm just trying to put these pieces together. There's an ongoing investigation, and there has been now since July. Comey told lawmakers today that his agency's been investigating possible coordination between the Trump campaign and Russian officials since last July. Doesn't make sense. I mean, who's running the FBI and the Department of Justice last July? It'd be the Obama administration doing this. But James Clapper, Obama administration, and a couple of others have said they've seen no evidence whatsoever of any collusion. And yet Comey knows all this, that Putin hated Clinton so much. The flip side of that coin was he had a clear preference for the person running against the person he hated so much. So Russia wanted to hurt our democracy and Hillary and help Trump. Now, mind you, folks, all of this is being said, and there isn't any evidence of it. So it's clear to me what's going on here. Look at what has actually happened. We have Donald Trump on the phone with foreign leaders after he becomes president, and even during the transition. Classified phone calls. Those are leaked. The transcripts of his phone calls are leaked, and they're lied about. In the case of his phone call with the president of Mexico, it was said to be an abomination of a call, a disaster. Turns out not to be true. Same thing with the Prime Minister of Australia, said to be so bad that somebody hung up on somebody in the call. Turns out neither was the case. Now Trump's private taxes have been leaked. The New York Times and the Washington Post have run story after story after story using the word wiretaps. There have been nameless sources in the intelligence community all over the past 2 months of last year leaking various elements of things, but no evidence of any of it. The New York Times on January 20th said there were wiretaps in which Trump and his team were being investigated. And yet with all that, there's no evidence of collusion, and yet Trump's the subject of the investigation? When his taxes have been leaked, when his phone calls are being monitored, Trump is the subject of an FBI investigation. Some of the reasons why this doesn't make sense to me. In the first place, folks, if you're the Russians and you want to affect the outcome of the election, you don't have to get in touch with one of the candidates. You can do that on your own. You don't need anybody's permission. Let's say the Russians wanted to help Hillary. They don't need to call her and get her permission to help her undermine Trump, or vice versa. They just do it. The next thing, there hasn't been any kind of a quid pro quo here. And by that I mean, Trump has not lifted the sanctions that Obama placed on the Russians. Trump has not let the 35 ambassadors or diplomats that Obama sent back to Moscow, he's not let them back in. There hasn't been not one indication of Trump going soft on Russia. Not one. Nikki Haley at the UN speaks out against Russia in no uncertain terms. And if there were collusion, let me ask you this. If there were collusion, let's say Trump and the Russians were actually working together, don't you think Trump, rather than acting all buddy-buddy with Putin and all friendly, would have been scorching Putin all this time to throw everybody off the scent? If there were actual collusion, if Trump and Putin were big buddies and working together to somehow undermine the election, which even today it was stated didn't happen. The big news of these hearings is not even being reported. The big news of these hearings is that the Russians did not, could not, would not, have not, don't know how to tamper with votes. They didn't do it. There wasn't even any hemming or hawing in the answers. Both Comey and Admiral Rogers definitively said in one-word answers, no, to all kinds of questions about whether or not the Russians had anything to do with votes, either the way they were cast or the way they were counted. Nope. We even know that this Jill Steinbabe, the Democrat, the Green Party can't, whatever, she did this recount. Trump ended up getting more votes in some of these states than what he ended up with in the official count. There is no evidence. That, to me, is the news of these hearings. But that's not what's being reported. That's, in fact, being ignored. So if you're Trump and you're working with the Russians anyway, even though there's no way to sabotage the vote, wouldn't you go out of your way in public to scorch Putin every chance you got, scorch the Russians, instead of talking about how much you admire Putin, what a great guy Putin is, how much you appreciate Putin complimenting you, which Trump did? So much of this is simple violation of common sense and human nature. And as far as the Russians are concerned, okay, so they hack the Democrat National Committee network, and they leave evidence that it was them. And yet, what did we learn recently? We learned in another WikiLeaks treasure trove of documents released from the CIA that the CIA has software that can hack computers and leave fingerprints of other nations. You were not here that day. That's why you're frowning. But that is big news. It is big news, but it's not being reported, not being talked about. But the CIA has numerous hacking tools that allows them to hack any computer network and make it look like the Russians did it, or the Chinese, or the Japanese, or the Norks. Why would the Russians leave evidence that it was them? If they were serious about hacking the DNC and they wanted to really make it work and they wanted to remain in the shadows and nobody know it, why would they leave fingerprints that trail right back to them? Now, if you want to play the double psychology move, okay, well, they wanted to do that precisely, Rush, because people would ask questions like you. And so they left their fingerprints so that people would say just what you said. Why would the Russians? It couldn't be the Russians. They wouldn't be stupid enough to leave their own evidence. Well, you got to be too cute by half to come up with answers to this that violate common sense. But again, all of this, see, this is the frustrating thing, folks. The big news of the day is no evidence whatsoever that the Russians hacked voting. No evidence whatsoever. It's not possible. They're not investigating whether that happened. It just didn't because it couldn't. Obama has said so. Any number of people before all this heated up the way it has said so. But that's not the news. Because the purpose of all of this is to permanently damage Donald Trump and make it impossible for him to govern. That's all this is about. There's a secondary aspect of it, with the Democrats on the committee having to service their lunatic base, which has been led to believe that Russia did hack the election and that Trump was part of it. That story's been around so long, it's been added to for so long, and it's been amplified that they believe it now. The expectations have been raised to the point here that the truth, Democrats are scared to death of the day their base learns that none of this happened. So that day has to be kicked down the road. That day has to be delayed as long as it can. And that's what the purpose of these hearings is to make it look like there's something there, to make it look like the ongoing investigation's getting close. But it is to overall paint Donald Trump's presidency as illegitimate, and therefore his agenda illegitimate, and things that he wants, his budget, health care revisions, tax cuts, whatever, is to make it all illegitimate and subject to reversal should they be able to get rid of Trump, because he shouldn't have been there in the first place. That's what this is about. I got to take a break. We'll come back. We will continue in mere moments. Either that or the Russians are hacking our bumper computer. Did you know that all the bumper music's on a computer here? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I just got a I got a message from somebody who's shocked at all of this incoming at Donald Trump, who just can't believe, thought there would be some support and some unity by now. And because this person believes that what Trump wants to do is what's exactly needed in this country, and thought that there would be, after a certain passage of time, at least some support for doing the right thing, for changing the direction of the country, to bring it back economically, to help people do better, to make health care more affordable. And this person is just shocked at what he's seeing today. And asking me if I, folks, I'm not. I hate playing the I told you so game, but I just want to go on record. None of this surprises me. And I'm sure that if we search the archives of this program, I could come up with countless examples where I predicted something like this. I mean, obviously not specifically, but, this isn't left versus right. This isn't Democrat versus Republican. This is establishment versus outsider, or whatever term that you want to attach to Donald Trump here. And what we're seeing, what all of this, these hearings today, what happened last week, the week before that, what happened during the transition period, what all of this is can be explained simply by saying, look at how terrified they are in the Washington, New York establishment of Donald Trump and draining the swamp. The never-Trumpers on both sides of the aisle. There are conservative never-Trumpers today celebrating over the fact that Comey made it official that there's an investigation of Trump and colluding with the Russians. And these people know that there isn't any evidence of this. But that doesn't matter. What everybody in Washington supports is the smearing, the slander, and the libel of Donald Trump. And these hearings today, the FBI Director James Comey is trying to save the jobs of a lot of people. He's trying to save the careers of a whole lot of people, his included. And I think an inappropriate way. And the Republicans in this committee, I look at folks, I've been waiting, I've been patiently waiting, I've been trying to keep the powder dry, but the Republicans on this committee, I know it's early and they're going to go on all day, but so far, outside of Trey Gowdy and a question from Peter King and Devin Nunes, the chairman, there just hasn't been much. For example, are you still investigating the Clinton Foundation, Director Comey? Well, I can't say. By the way, Comey said he got special permission to reveal this investigation. Who gave him that special permission? He said he went to the Department of Justice. Who's over there? Who runs that? That would be Jeff Sessions. The Trump administration itself granted permission for Comey to announce this today. Well, no, my point there is that there's no attempted cover-up of anything going on here. The Trump administration could very well have said, Jeff Sessions could have said, Comey, look, it's just like you said last summer about Hillary. We don't detail ongoing investigations. But he today was given permission to do just that. And he's running with it. And the whole point of this today, and by the way, doesn't mean I'm not going to go through this and give you what the real news of these hearings is today and what the backdrop of all this is, because there's a really salient factor that's driving this from the Democrat side that is never going to be reported or commented on, which I'm going to touch on myself today. But as I say, the purpose of this is to further the narrative that Trump is illegitimate, that he should not be president, that his election was the result of tampering by the Russians. So the objective is that Trump either stops this reform business he's got, stops this drain the swamp stuff, and starts letting the Washington Republicans run the town again, or they're going to impeach him. That's the message being sent today. You either straighten up and fly right, or you're gone. We're coming for you is the message of these hearings tonight. There's more, too, but unfortunately, my friends, I have taken another. I can remember when Teddy Kennedy worked with the Soviets to undermine the 1984 Reagan campaign. Now, you might think that's not relevant. That's so long ago, and it's not the same Russia as the Russia we're talking about today, but it is highly relevant, folks, because the Democrats have not changed who they are. You know, I bet if the truth of this were known, because we know that there has been collusion between Obama and the Russians. We know that by way of the open mic that caught Obama's comment to Dmitry Medvedev just before the 2012 election. You know, Obama was telling Putin that we're going to be getting rid of additional nuclear missiles, but he had hands tied at the moment. But he said to Medvedev, tell Vladimir that I'll have a little bit more flexibility after the election. There's been collusion, the Clinton campaign and the Russians, Bill Clinton working with some guy in Canada to end up profiting from the sale of the portion of U.S. uranium supply to the one of the Russian satellite countries. And I really think that just when all of this is, the truth of this is ever known, if it ever is, that it's going to be the exact opposite of what this narrative is. That any collusion, any suspected alliances that have existed here are going to be between the Democrats and the Russians and not Trump. The FBI director wringing his hands, talking about the Russians undermining faith in our elections. What is this today, if nothing but undermining faith in our election? In fact, isn't that the Democrat Party objective? It seems to me that the Democrat Party objective is to undermine faith in our election. Specifically and head on. The Democrat Party is trying to make, and their media acolytes, trying to make everybody think that the election last December was fraudulent. All because they cannot deal with the fact that Hillary Clinton was conspired against. The evidence is clear. Large majorities of Americans in 31 states did conspire against Hillary Clinton. It's called voting. They didn't vote for her. 31 states voted for Donald Trump. We don't need the Russians helping to do that. Hillary did that all on her own. This is what, to me, underlines this whole thing. Hillary Clinton lost the election because she deserved to lose the election. She did not run a good campaign. She ran an arrogant and condescending campaign. She ran a campaign that was steeped in presumption that she was going to win, and it was even beneath her to have to travel to states that the Democrats all thought were automatic. They didn't even have to worry about it. They had it in the bag. Even up to 9 o'clock on election night, they still thought Hillary Clinton was going to win this. You go back and look at reruns of election night. By the way, if you ever have some time and you want to actually enjoy yourself, go back and replay. Pick any network, ABC, CBS, NBC. You can do this on YouTube. And watch election night coverage again. You know, start about 7 o'clock. It's 6 if you want to. You just watch it. And you'll see smiles, pre-celebrations, happiness, everything but the popping of champagne corks. And then 9 o'clock, 9:30, no matter what network you look at, there was a detectable and sudden change in attitude and opinion. And fear began to creep in, including on Fox. I was watching Fox that night, and Chris Wallace, sometime between 9 and 9:15, was looking up at their giant tort board up there. He said, gang, I think we need to be paying attention to something here. As I see it up there, it looks like dare I say this? He said, I hemmed and hawed. He was not comfortable saying it, but it was undeniable. You look at what we've got right now, and Donald Trump, you can see how he can win this. And from that moment forward, it all changed. And if you have time to watch it all the way up to 2:30 or 3 in the morning, there's an hour and a half where literally not a single vote was reported. The tallies in all of these states that were still out for an hour and a half. It's like they stopped counting. It's like they stopped reporting. I asked somebody what was going on. I called the Russian ambassador. I said, what are they doing here? Seriously thinks, don't say that. They're going to believe you. Now, I called somebody who has experience. I said, what's going on here? He said, they're looking for votes for Hillary. I said, who is they? He said, Democrat election lawyers and precinct bosses are trying to find a way to report votes for Hillary in these states where she needs them. And he said, there doesn't look like going to be able to. And they weren't able to because they weren't there. Hillary Clinton lost the election. We didn't need the Russians' help. We didn't need she sabotaged herself by being who she is. Her campaign sabotaged itself by being what it was. And the evidence from election night is abundant. Millions of Americans conspired to influence the outcome of elections, and there's evidence all over the place for it. It's called votes. Unlike these giant, wild assumptions that the Democrats and Comey are making about Russia doing it, the simple fact of the matter is all the evidence you need are the votes. And they were cast, and they were counted. And for an hour and a half around midnight, everybody went dark while they went looking for phantom votes, and they couldn't find enough. And that was that. And from that moment on, a creeping insanity has infected the Democrat Party and the Washington establishment. Grab audio soundbite number 23. Now, wait a minute. No, it's number 20. Yeah, it is 23. This is Mike Rogers and FBI Director James Comey, Devin Nunes, who is the committee chairman here, California, asking the questions. As of today, Admiral Rogers, do you have any evidence that Russia cyber actors changed vote tallies in the state of Michigan?
No, I do not, but I would highlight we're a foreign intelligence organization, not a domestic intelligence organization. So it would be fair to say we are probably not the best organization to provide a more complete answer.
How about the state of Pennsylvania?
No, sir.
The state of Wisconsin?
No, sir.
State of Florida?
No, sir.
The state of North Carolina?
No, sir.
The state of Ohio?
No, sir.
So you have no intelligence that suggests or evidence that suggests any votes were changed?
I have nothing generated by the National Security Agency, sir.
Director Comey, do you have any evidence at the FBI that any votes were changed in the states that I mentioned to Admiral Rogers?
No.
That's the news of the hearing. You probably will not hear that if all you do is access the drive-by media, but that's the news of the hearing. I mean, they're tampering with the election, right? They're looking for evidence that Russia colluded with Trump in the election, right? Well, they can't find anywhere votes were cast, and they can't find anywhere votes were counted. What else is there? Well, Mr. Limbaugh, the Russians hacked Podesta's computer, and they had all that news out there. It was very, very bad. Well, these guys were asked about that. Would you believe that Adam Schiff or one of his lackeys on the Democrat side literally asked Comey if he thought that the Podesta emails could have resulted in votes for Trump? And Comey said, I had no idea. How could we analyze something like that? No, was the answer. So, yeah, 31 states had lots of voters conspiring, working in collusion to defeat Hillary Clinton. And it happened. The Russians had nothing to do, according to the gods of the intelligence community. The Russians had nothing to do with the election in terms of votes in any way. That just further emphasizes what this today is really all about. So here's the things to look for. Here are the things to look for. Because I'll tell you what the objective of this is. Just to repeat it very quickly, we'll take a break, come back with your phone calls. The objective here is, I say one of two things. There could be more. But the first thing is, okay, Trump, you're going to get the message. Stand down. Stop all this draining of the swamp. Stop all this Obamacare stuff. Stop all this stuff you're doing on trade. Just stop all this stuff and go back to governing the way we want you to govern, or we're going to impeach you. Because that's what this is about. This is all about furthering the de-legitimization of the entire Trump presidency, even though there's no evidence that it's illegitimate in any way, shape, manner, form. There's none. There is literally none. That's what makes this so Twilight Zone-ish. And again, if there's any undermining of American elections, it's happening today on Capitol Hill as part of this committee hearing. This is Mike. I'm glad you called, sir. Great to have you. How you doing?
Hey, make a retired Air Force dittos, Rush.
Thank you very much, sir.
Hey, if Hillary had won this election, the Democrats would be laughing at the notion of the Russians somehow undermining our election, much less having an impact on national security. There'd be no interest in this. There'd be no hearings. There'd be no discussions. And if the Republicans called for one, the Democrats would be accusing them of some kind of a witch hunt to undermine President Clinton's presidency.
The Russians, wait, this is a great point. The Republicans would have never even brought this up. In fact, Comey said that. Let's break this down. Comey said today that their investigation of the Russians trying to influence the election began in July. Now, the Republican convention was in July, so it could be that what Comey is saying is that the investigation began after Trump got the nomination. Or it could be that he said so, that the investigation began beforehand. Before Trump got the nomination. Who started this? That's the thing I want to know. Who got this investigation going? Whose idea was this?
Yeah.
But, here's the thing, the point that you make that is really good. Had Hillary won the election, the story was out there that the Russians had hacked. We know this, and that's the point that you make. It was out there. Comey says they started in July. The media had stories going on this through the summer, and all of this was designed to influence people into not voting for Trump. It was all about the influence that Russia had with Trump, because Trump was out saying good things about Putin. And remember, Trump told the joke about maybe the Russians could find Hillary's missing emails. So they began this to defeat Trump at the ballot box. It didn't work. If Hillary had won, you're right, that would have been the last anybody heard about this. There wouldn't have been anybody in Washington worried that the Russians were trying to tamper with our elections and undermine them. Not a single syllable would have been uttered about this if she had won.
Well, Rush, do you remember about 3 weeks before the election, Obama was criticizing Trump for even bringing up the idea that the Russians had some influence. In fact, he told Trump, "I suggest you get out there and start campaigning for speculating on the election."
I remember that. We've mentioned that 2 or 3 times here. Obama back in March of 2016, a year ago when this came up, said it was ridiculous, that there's no way that the Russians could tamper with our elections because they're too widespread. They're not localized enough. You wouldn't know where to go. You wouldn't know what to do. You wouldn't know who to try to influence in a way. He said it was impossible. And then when Trump started complaining about things, Obama said, grow up. Grow a pair. Instead of complaining about things, go out there and just start campaigning.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that what's being done today is a greater chance of undermining faith in our elections than whatever the Russians did, because there isn't any evidence the Russians did anything. Mike, I appreciate the call very much. By the way, the Gorsuch hearings began today, too. The Democrats have two soap operas going today. They've got the Destroy Trump soap opera and the effort here on Gorsuch, who is the Supreme Court nominee. And this is somewhat interesting, ladies and gentlemen. This is from the, what is this? Well, I'm not sure the source of this, but the story is this. There's a backup story, NPR. It's a legitimate story. I just can't find in the small font here the actual source here. But a group of 11 female former law clerks for Neil Gorsuch have submitted a letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee in support of the nominee. Wait, that's happened, but that's not here. This is the headline I'm looking for. I'm sorry, folks. I've got so damn many things happening here at once, and it's an ongoing organizational problem. Former law student Gorsuch told class women manipulate maternal leave. Now, the big news here, New York Magazine is reporting that a former student says that Judge Gorsuch told them that women manipulate maternity benefits. And so it's being set up here that Gorsuch is anti-female, that he might be a misogynist, that he's prejudiced against women, because he's out there saying that women manipulate maternity leave for maternity benefits. Which, I mean, here we go again. The truth is that people manipulate benefits of all kinds, and the argument that maternity benefits are somehow the only form of benefit not subject to that behavior is absurd, but it's the person that's responsible for this that's interesting. The quoted former student of Gorsuch, identified by New York Magazine as Jennifer Sisk, who graduated from the University of Colorado Law School last year. She is a former operative for Democrat Mark Udall. She went to college in Massachusetts at Wellesley and then worked as an aide in Mark Udall's Senate office in Washington. And that part of the story is not part of the New York Magazine story. She's just identified as a struggling student. He's a student of Gorsuch. He just wanted to become a good lawyer, and she's shocked and disturbed and disappointed and saddened and frightened and scared because this nominee actually said that women manipulate maternity benefits. And therefore, he's not suitable. He's not suitable if he thinks women manipulate things. Is that news? But doesn't matter. Reality is never on the table when it comes to the Democrat Party here. So, and then Dianne Feinstein, I didn't see it, but apparently her opening statement was scorched earth. Now, I've been reading all this stuff ever since Gorsuch was nominated. I've been reading it in all of the intellectual blogs and everywhere about how he's a slam dunk. This guy's unassailable. He's going to sail through. It's not going to take very long because this guy simply has a record that nobody can oppose. And we've been told the Democrats know this. They're going to save their powder, keep it dry for the next nominee. And I said, just you wait. Dude, what more do you need to see to understand that the Democrats are going to resist and oppose virtually everything Trump does? To have you with us on the EIB network. How are you doing today, sir?
Happy Spring Rush.
Thank you very much.
Listen, I knew it was going to be a good day, but until I heard your monologue introduction, I had no idea how good it was going to be. The point of focus that you came up with, the end of the DNC, they've done it before, Rush. Like you said, when we study our history, my big example, and I've heard no one talk about it, is the Florida Chads. Whenever we win, and they fear that they're not going to exist anymore, the scandals are created. Like today, when you showed, they said, do you have actual physical proof. Smoking gun, no. So I think this is a glorious day.
Wait just a sec. What do you mean by when you say the end of the DNC? I don't remember talking about the end of the DNC.
Well, when you say that they took such a shellacking in the election, and you have these hearings, and when they asked Comey the hearing, do you have proof in all these different states that the election was tampered with, and he said no, and then the other guy says no, you said that it's over. But no, it's not over, because they can't let it be over, because their base is going to go away. You know, Trump already carried all this blue collar. If they have any more of their base erodes, wait until you see 2018 what happens.
Well, okay, I admit I'm confused. I think what you heard me say was the Democrat base has become so demanding and so expecting that there is evidence that the Democrats are scared to death of the day they have to admit when this investigation ends that there isn't any. But just to clarify, I don't think anything's ever going to happen to the Democrat National Committee, and I didn't mean to imply that. But here's what I base this on. But I appreciate, Mike, your comment on he's talking about the monologue in this hour, on the opening hour. Okay. Glenn Greenwald, who runs a website called The Intercept, and he's Snowden's buddy. He's the journalist that Snowden turned to tell his story. Now, Glenn Greenwald, way out there on the left-wing liberal to the hilt. But he's not one of the conspiratorial loons. And he posted, this is 4 days ago now, and the headline, Key Democrat Officials Now Warning Base Not to Expect Evidence of Trump-Russia Collusion. Now, I want to put this in a proper timeline, because this story, 4 days before Comey comes out today and says, oh, yeah, we have an ongoing investigation of whether or not there was collusion. This story, quoting Democrat Party officials, says that the Democrats already know there's no such evidence, that their base has been misled, that their base has been given all of these expectations, and that Trump is going to be impeached, that Trump is going to be rendered illegitimate. Here's the plan. Impeach Trump, put Pence in there, and then scare him out of the Oval Office. And find a way to put Hillary in. This is what the Democrat Party base literally thinks can happen in the next year, in the next 2 years. And here's why, or what Greenwald says, and I'm going to give us some excerpts from the piece. From MSNBC shows to town hall meetings across the country, the overarching issue for the Democrat Party's base since Trump's victory has been Russia, often suffocating attention for other issues. This fixation has persisted even though it has no chance to sink the Trump presidency unless it is proven that high levels of the Trump campaign actively colluded with the Kremlin to manipulate the outcome of U.S. elections, a claim for which absolutely no evidence has thus far been presented. Go back and grab soundbite 23. Look, I want to give you the news of these hearings. I'm going to intersperse this because even Greenwald here, everybody has to report the caveat. There isn't any evidence, folks. I don't know how to say this more powerfully and more profoundly than just to say it. There is no evidence that the Russians or anybody else colluded with the Trump campaign to affect the voting, which is what an election is. An election is people casting their votes and other people counting them. That's what an election is. A campaign is a different aspect of the election. The election itself occurs on one day, and it's where people vote and then other people count them. And the Russians had nothing to do with that. And everybody in the intelligence community admits that. But they're not letting it go at that because it's not really about that. Go back to soundbite 23. This is Devin Nunes, the Republican chairman of the committee, asking Mike Rogers the question, as of today, Admiral, do you have any evidence that Russia cyber actors changed vote tallies in the state of Michigan?
No, I do not, but I would highlight we're a foreign intelligence organization, not a domestic intelligence organization. So it would be fair to say we are probably not the best organization to provide a more complete answer.
How about the state of Pennsylvania?
No, sir.
The state of Wisconsin?
No, sir.
State of Florida?
No, sir.
The state of North Carolina?
No, sir.
The state of Ohio?
No, sir.
So you have no intelligence that suggests or evidence that suggests any votes were changed?
I have nothing generated by the National Security Agency, sir.
Director Comey, do you have any evidence at the FBI that any votes were changed in the states that I mentioned to Admiral Rogers?
No.
No. Without any hesitation, without any doubt, there's no investigation of that, by the way. There can't be. It didn't happen. It couldn't happen. Obama as much as admitted it, and everybody with any common sense knows they couldn't have done it. They wouldn't know what machines to tamper with. They wouldn't know what counties, what precincts. It's not feasible. The only collusion that took place on Election Day was by the voters. Voters in 31 states conspired to defeat Hillary Clinton in a legitimate and fair United States election, which is being undermined today and every day by the American left. The media, the Democrat Party, and all of their satellites are engaging in a daily effort to undermine the outcome of last year's election. The Russians had nothing to do with it. So Greenwald is talking about how the expectations here have been raised for all of these people that watch MSNBC and CNN and read the New York Times and the Washington Post. He says the principal problem for Democrats is that so many media figures and online charlatans are personally benefiting from feeding the base increasingly unhinged, fact-free conspiracies. That there are now millions of partisan soldiers absolutely convinced of a Trump-Russia conspiracy for which there's no evidence. And they're all waiting for the day, which they regard as inevitable and imminent, when this story will be proven and Trump will be removed. Again, so many media figures and online charlatans are personally benefiting from feeding the base unhinged, fact-free conspiracies. That would mean increased subscribers at the New York Times. That would mean increased subscribers circulation Washington Post. That would mean higher ratings for CNN, MSNBC. They are benefiting from perpetuating this lie. They are personally benefiting. Higher ratings, higher ad rates, more ad pages, you name it. But there's something besides that. They are furthering an illusion. They are furthering a lie to undermine an election. That is the end game here. But Greenwald says they're taking it too far here. Key Democrat officials are clearly worried about the expectations that have been purposely stoked and are now trying to tamp them down. Many key Democrat officials have tried to signal that the beliefs the base has been led to adopt have no basis in reason or evidence. The latest official to throw cold water on this circus is Obama's former acting CIA chief, Michael Morell. What makes him particularly notable in this context is that Morell was one of Hillary Clinton's most vocal CIA surrogates. Last August, Mike Morell not only endorsed Clinton in the pages of the New York Times, but also became the first high official to explicitly accuse Trump of disloyalty, claiming in the intelligence business, we would say that Mr. Putin had recruited Mr. Trump as an unwitting agent of the Russian Federation. But on Wednesday night, last week, Mike Morell appeared at an intelligence community forum to cast doubt on allegations that members of the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. He said, on the question of the Trump campaign conspiring with the Russians here, there is smoke, but there's no fire at all. He added, there's no little campfire, there's no little candle, there's no spark, and there's a lot of people looking for it. So Greenwald's point here is that key Democrats, that would be elected officials, members of the House and the Senate, not all, because some of them are just as wacko as the Democrat base is. But this is a comment on Democrat liberal media and how irresponsible it is because it's personally benefiting from perpetuating and hyping this story. And in the process, it's creating all of these legitimate expectations that the viewers and the readers, the consumers of this news have, that Trump's toast. His point is they already think it. They already believe Trump's toast. It's just a matter of time now. So on top of that, here comes today's hearings. Now, by the way, the Greenwald story goes much longer. There's much more detail to it. But that's the thrust of it. And it's from 4 days ago. 4 days ago, there's no evidence. Zilch, zero, nada. Democrats worried. Expectations way too high. Oh, what are we going to do when our base find out that there's nothing to it? Well, here came Comey today. And Comey made it plain that he had gotten permission from the Department of Justice to admit that there is an ongoing investigation. And Adam Schiff, the Democrat ranking member of this committee, didn't look like he had any expectation problems, didn't look like he was worried. So if there's a faction of the Democrat Party worried, because they know this is not true, they know this is BS, but at the same time, they probably know and hope that it can work in getting rid of Trump. Or if not getting rid of Trump, then neutering him and making him so afraid to govern that he basically just becomes a placeholder. That's also one of the objectives. Let's take another brief break here. We'll be back. Phone's Maria, Jacksonville, Florida. Great to have you on the program. How you doing?
Hi, Rush. I want to know, why was it possible for Comey to investigate all of Weiner's emails in a week's time, and he can't even commit as to when he can give Congress any updates into any of his current investigations?
Well, because this is a never-ending investigation. In fact, a Democrat congresswoman asked him to explain the process of an ongoing investigation. He said, well, that's pretty much what it is. It's an ongoing investigation. He said, well, can you tell us how long it will take? Well, no. Well, can you give us the average time of an ongoing investigation? Well, there is no average time, Comey said. Each investigation is its own investigation, and we never limit or prejudge it. We follow the facts. We follow the evidence. Well, they're following a lot of nothing right now because there isn't any evidence. None whatsoever. Now, I get your point, though. Let's go back and review something. I don't know, were you as impressed as I was about how serious James Comey was, about how serious a crime it is to release classified information? Trey Gowdy really pumped him on this today. And these guys don't seem interested in finding who leaks this stuff. They're not interested. They don't want to discuss it. They don't want to go there. They're not interested in who unmasked, for example, Mike Flynn. Now, the way Flynn was caught, Flynn was not being surveilled. And I knew this was the case. The Russian ambassador is being surveilled. And so what happens is probably the NSA monitoring whatever the Russian ambassador does, and there's a phone call with Flynn, Mike Flynn, and they hear it. Now, when something like that happens, and Flynn's not the target, they're supposed to ignore it unless what they hear constitutes a without question serious criminal offense. It's part of the protection built in. If you're going to be monitoring foreign actors and they have dealings with Americans who are not targets, not persons of interest, when you hear them, you're supposed to ignore them, and nobody's supposed to tell anybody what was said. Well, we know everything, Flynn. Well, we don't know. That's the point. They've got the transcript of the phone call between Flynn and the Russian ambassador, but they leaked a bunch of it that made it look like he was discussing the lifting of sanctions and all that when he wasn't. And so he was being asked. Comey today was, who would be in charge of unmasking? I mean, there's the technique or the term for hiding the identity of an American on a transcript of an intercepted call who's not the target is masking. You have to unmask that person if doing so is warranted by evidence and circumstance. And so Trey Gowdy was asking for the unmasking of Flynn, but Comey said, I can't comment on individuals. I can't comment on what's in the news. I can't comment on media reports. I can't comment on it. So Gowdy had to ask generic questions about theoretical circumstances to get Comey to even play ball. It was clear that Comey didn't want to say anything about that, except how serious a crime it is to release classified information. He said it over and over again. He stressed it so much that I couldn't help but think this is a different James Comey from the FBI director who said that no prosecutor would prosecute Hillary Clinton for releasing classified information in her emails. That's what she did. And Comey's the guy who said, I couldn't find an illicit motive. And absent an illicit motive, there's no reason to prosecute her. And yet, look what we're doing here. It's the exact opposite of the way Comey said he had to deal with Hillary. If we think back to all of these media leaks and stories that there have been from, let's just say, since the election, we've had stories indicating a serious investigation of the Trump campaign and its ties to Russia. We've had unnamed intelligence officials, IC, intelligence community officials, saying this or that or the other thing. They're unnamed. It's the Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, and, of course, the three networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, breathlessly reporting that this investigation is underway, that there are members of the intelligence community who have come across things so distressing that they have sought out media people in order to take the veil off of all of these things. The New York Times on January 19th and 20th, two different stories. The story on the 20th had the headline, Wiretaps, Wiretapped Evidence, Trump campaign, Trump transition. We know there were wiretaps because, as I was just discussing, General Flynn was picked up talking to the Russian ambassador. And you get back to, well, who ordered all of this? And you remember there was a New York Times story, the headline of which, Obama administration rushed to preserve intelligence of Russian election hacking. Well, up against that, we have Obama in March of 2016, and a couple of times subsequent to that, later on in the year, poo-pooing the idea that the Russians could have hacked the election. And on one of those occasions, Obama even chastised Trump for complaining about it. Hey, Obama tried to act like the experienced veteran and that Trump was a young neophyte rookie. And he said, essentially, hey, look, you're in the big leagues now, boy. You don't start complaining about things. You go out and you win the election. Don't start complaining about things. You just run your campaign and try to win. Poo-pooing Trump's effort, he thought, to create excuses. So clearly there was an investigation going on, and it did involve wiretaps, if we are to believe the New York Times and the Washington Post. All of these things reported in the mainstream media. None of them were made up by Trump. And I remember each one commenting on it that day as they happened. And then Trump says that he has been wiretapped at Trump Tower. And every one of these news sources, these papers and cable news networks, reacts with righteous indignation, denying it, claiming it never happened. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. And I remember thinking, well, how can this be? How can there have been no investigation? Because this is what they were saying when Trump alleged that he was being wiretapped. The reaction from all of these mainstream media news sources who had reported essentially that, not that he'd been wiretapped, but there was investigation, were all denying. What does Trump think? He's not under investigation. This is absurd. This is paranoia. Who does this Trump guy think he is? So my very naive question is, well, what was being investigated if Trump wasn't? Because when Trump threw out that claim that the New York Times printed, and that he claimed that the Obama administration had tapped the wires at Trump Tower, is what he said, and the immediate denials that were forthcoming were denials not just of the allegation that Trump had been wiretapped and that Trump Tower had, but that Trump was silly and paranoid for thinking that there was an investigation anyway. And I remember being literally flabbergasted because the people saying this had spent the last 3 months reporting on it. Not an official investigation, mind you, but rather leak after leak after leak that constituted a media investigation. It was clear that the media, which is the Democrat Party, was looking for evidence. That is an investigation, whether it's officially sanctioned or not. There was an investigation being conducted by numerous people to try to find any incriminating evidence on Trump. And yet when Trump claims he was wiretapped, they denied it and acted like Trump was an idiot. And I remember thinking at the time that Trump had just thrown a little grenade back at them and had forced them to admit that everything that had come before that constituted this unofficial investigation had just kind of blown up, and that the people who were running it had been tricked or panicked into saying there wasn't such an investigation. Now we come to today where Comey says there is an ongoing investigation of collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign, or an investigation of the Russians' effort to undermine our elections or what have you. So just what are they investigating? If Trump was not and is not being surveilled, and by the way, everybody is making tracks as fast as they can today in these hearings. Everybody couldn't wait to get to a microphone to say in their own words that there is no evidence whatsoever that Donald Trump had been wiretapped. None. It's silly. It's absurd. Comey said no evidence. Admiral Rogers at the NSA said no evidence. Every member of the House Intelligence Committee, no evidence. Both parties, no evidence. People can't wait to humiliate Trump, embarrass Trump, and say, nope, he was not being surveilled. Well, how can that be if there is an investigation? How can Trump not be part of it? What are they looking at then? Is it Manafort? Is it Roger Stone, Carter Page, these former Trump campaign people that worked for him for a couple of weeks back last summer? And Comey says, well, I can't give you the details. I cannot discuss ongoing details of investigation. I can only admit that this one's taking place because the Department of Justice has authorized me to break department policy this one time because it is so crucial and it's so important that this is one of those times that the Trump administration, Department of Justice, has authorized me to tell you that there is an ongoing investigation of the Russians and the Trump campaign, or the Russians and interfering in American elections. My point here is, folks, I think that so much of this is literally about nothing. The FBI, anybody can have an investigation open and nobody ask a single question for months. But there have been all of these contradictory statements, like Obama rushed to preserve intelligence of Russian election hacking. What intelligence? How did they get it? If Obama was hurrying here to preserve intelligence of the Russians hacking the election, what intelligence? That means they've got some evidence. It would imply, or we would infer, they have some evidence here. And yet nobody has any, no matter where you go. In every one of these media stories, the last 3 months of last year up to the present, in every one of these stories with all of this damning information from these nameless intelligence people, buried in every single story in either the Times or the Washington Post is a small little paragraph reminding everybody that despite everything in this report, investigators have still found no evidence of any collusion. It's just been a bunch of supposition that has been reported and designed to look like mountains of evidence have been produced and is being cataloged and is being prepared for dissemination when there isn't any. How is it that every aspect of this investigation has leaked except for the real evidence? With as much leaking as has gone on here, if there were evidence that Trump and Putin, or Trump and the Russian ambassador, Trump and anybody in Russia, had actually colluded, don't you think that would have leaked as well? Because everything else has. And you know as well as I do that if any of these actors on the Democrat side, if they had even a morsel of evidence to support what all of this is supposedly about, collusion between the Russians and somebody to hack the election, don't you think that would have leaked? Along, because everything else has. And yet it hasn't. So there is an investigation, but then there wasn't, and now today there is again. Now, Comey says there is today, but the media and all of these intel sources, when Trump said he was being wiretapped, they all practically in unison, no, that's ridiculous. Who does he think he is? There's no investigation of Trump. Trump wasn't wiretapped. There's no investigation of Trump. We haven't found any evidence of collusion in 6 months, and yet the investigation is ongoing with no end in sight. So if there is an investigation, what is it? What specifically, and they can't tell us that. Comey specifically said, well, I can't get into these details. I want to re-ask another question that I asked, which I think is a key to this. The Russians hacked the election, right? Everybody believes that now as much as the sun comes up every morning. Do you not? That's been in the news so frequently. It's been in the news for such a long period of time now. And there haven't been any denials of it. And if you landed from Mars and opened a newspaper, you would find out that the Russians hacked the election. What was the hack? Does anybody know? What was the hack? No, I'm not asking rhetorically. I'm asking specifically, what was the hack that affected the election? What about the election did the Russians hack? And in all of these stories that have been with us for months, no specific answer to that question has been given. What suffices for the answer is Podesta's emails. Yeah, the Russians hacked. That's right, Russia. That's right. That's right. The Russians hacked Podesta's email, except that they didn't. The emails of John Podesta ended up being made public because he mistakenly succumbed and fell to a phishing attack. It's still a hack, Russia. It's still a hack. No, it's not. It's not a hack. Nobody got into his computer until he let them. He opened the front door to his computer by clicking a specious link in an email. Has the mainstream media found a single voter who voted for Trump instead of Hillary because of what they saw in WikiLeaks? Has the mainstream media found a single voter who said they voted for Trump because of what they know the Russians did? Has the mainstream media found a single voter who said they voted for Trump because they were victims of the Russian hack? No. But I'll tell you what the media has found. In a tradition of media fake news, the media went to Nashville, Tennessee, and they have found two people who voted for Trump who claim they're disappointed. A classic drive-by media story. Disillusioned Trump voters. It's in the stack that I was planning on getting to today until his hearing stuff blew up. So again, what investigation of who if it's not Trump? And if it's not Trump, why are we even doing it? And this whole notion of undermining American elections, we're doing a better job of that with all of this that the Democrats are doing, combined with these hearings, than anything the Russians theoretically even wanted to do, much less did. We are undermining our elections with this charade known as these congressional hearings today. And what was the hack? What was the hack that turned this election around from a Hillary win to a Hillary loss? What was the hack? They haven't told us. They haven't identified it. Be right back after this, my friends. Hang in there. We'll be back. Great to have you on the program, Fred. How you doing?
I'm fine. Rush, let's just take a look at the 2% of the time where you're completely and utterly wrong. Your hypocrisy is kind of amazing. You're so upset, and I sense even scared that this investigation is taking place. You're kind of scared as to what they might find, and it's just starting. It may be going on for a couple of months, but the investigation is just starting. You weren't upset when Clinton was being investigated for the Benghazi incident. You wanted a full investigation for that, didn't you?
Yeah, there's all kinds of evidence there that she had been derelict in her duty. Four people died in Benghazi. Because is this the best you've got to sit here and claim that I was interested in getting to the truth about Benghazi, where 4 Americans died because of the incompetence and laziness of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, who was off the grid during the whole time. We couldn't even find him. And you think because I wanted to get to the bottom of that, I don't want to get to the reason there's no bottom here. Fred, the problem with this is there is no bottom. You just said the investigation just began, and you don't know that. If we've been reading the media, this investigation has been going on since even before Trump was nominated. Comey said today this investigation has been going on since last July. Fred, old buddy, old pal, this is a hell of a long time to have no evidence whatsoever. There's no bottom to get to here. And I'm not scared, Fred. I don't do scared. I am pissed, Fred. Because people like you are the targets. Your expectations, coupled with your naivete and bigoted partisanship, is what is stoking the fires of this. Because the Democrats are just hell-bent on feeding you something so you won't abandon them as ineffective and incompetent. They clearly couldn't win the election. Trump did, and nobody on your side can come to grips with that. Now, Yahoo started notifying account holders about a month ago, and relatively speaking, it's a smaller breach within Yahoo to past occasions of similar hacks, which have been higher. Yahoo has suffered a breach, ready for this, on more than 1 billion of their accounts in the last 3 years. And their CEO, a big Democrat donor, by the way, is going to get a $23 million severance package when she leaves. Imagine how much money she would have gotten if only 10 million people had been hacked. Marissa Mayer is her name. Big Obama-eyed, big Democrat donor. At any rate, folks, this new breach at Yahoo shows you that online attackers continue to know that account data is worth something. What was it? This Yahoo hack. I don't want to. It's either this Yahoo hack or one other hack. All the hackers needed was the information from 2 members, and having the login credentials of just 2 members enabled them to get into the password creation system, which then opened the doors to every account. Just 2 members. That's all it took. See, you don't even have to be targeted. You just have to be a member of a massive database that itself is targeted. There were some reports last year that hackers were getting as much as $300,000 on the dark web for this kind of data. Most of the hackers steal it, and the people they sell it to are the people who then engage in defrauding you. You know what else the timing of all this shows you? That you don't immediately know when one of your accounts is necessarily attacked. Most of the time you find out long afterwards. In some instances, in the case of Yahoo, they didn't announce it for a year. They sat around and waited. What happens is a database gets hacked, company panics, and they don't do anything. They wait to see if any of their members suffer from it. And if there isn't any immediate evidence, then they withhold admitting it, because a firestorm happens when they admit it. Well, they waited about a year on this. That's how much time can go by, some cases 2 years, before you even know that you're part of a hacked database. This is just another reason why you should have LifeLock identity theft protection. LifeLock constantly looks for evidence that your account has been tampered with and that data might be used illegally online. And when they spot that evidence, and they're the best at finding it, they alert you. That's when you get involved, confirming or denying the use of your name and account and whatever spending or activity they have found that looks like it's not you. If you find out that you're the victim of an attack and somebody has stolen your identity, you get LifeLock's help to restore your good name. They've got a staff of people that does nothing but restoration. Sign up today for LifeLock's identity theft protection. You'll be glad you did. You can do it online or via phone. 800-440-4833 is the phone number, or lifelock.com on the web. Either way, use my name when you sign up, and you will save 10% on the plan you choose. That's LifeLock, 800-440-4833. Did Russia hack Yahoo to influence the elections? I don't know for sure that we know who the Yahoo hackers are. And I don't know that Yahoo had any wiretaps going before the hack happened. In other words, I don't know if anybody was wiretapping Yahoo. We need an investigation. Get to the bottom of all this. Jerry in Cape Coral, Florida. Great to have you on the program, sir. Thank you for waiting.
Hey, thanks, Rush. Mega dittos from a decades-long listener and a recently retired Fed employee. I've got a different take on things. I know there's a lot of Trump supporters right now running around dismayed at Comey's announcement today, but I look at it like this. We get callers like the one you had just before from the loony left, and then these unhinged persons running around masquerading as mainstream media, and they've been throwing out all these theories, unsubstantiated theories, about some nefarious activities between Trump and the Russians during the campaign. Now, had Comey not said anything about an investigation, these theories would have gone on for the remaining 1,400 days of Trump's first term. My thought here is sooner rather than later, because we know there is anybody who's researched this and looked at it without blinders on knows there is no evidence, not a zilch, showing any kind of collusion between Trump's campaign or Trump and the Russians. Now, sooner, I think, rather than later, Comey's going to come out and he's going to say that the investigation's over and there is no evidence. What he did was throw a rope to these crazies out there, and they're desperately holding on to it. When he comes out and says that, it's going to put an end to it. Had he not, like I say, they could have run with this forever. But I think what's going to come out of this, because look at it, even today, Mitch McConnell, while sitting in on Judge Gorsuch's hearing, sent out a tweet saying that in his meeting with Comey, at the end of it, Comey told them they are not looking at President Trump over this. So I
wait a minute, hold on. Was that McConnell or was that Charles Grassley?
I'm sorry, that was Grassley. I saw that earlier. Wait a minute,
let's not zing past that. Grassley tweeted between noon and 12:30 today, Eastern Time. After hearing Comey, he said, I wish Comey would tell the committee what he told me about POTUS and the Russians, meaning that Grassley said that Comey told him that Trump was not part of the investigation. Now, exactly. There's some inference here because Grassley's tweet did not say that Comey had told him Trump was not being investigated. His tweet was simply, I wish Comey would tell the committee what he told me about POTUS and Russian investigation. So we were free to infer there that Grassley was suggesting Comey told him that Trump's not part of this, and he wished Comey would have said that today.
And I think what's going to happen is, at the end of this investigation, there is going to be information given out about how the information regarding Flynn and any other calls, how that came about, and maybe even who leaked this information and for what purpose. So I think in the meantime, this is great. Let the wax out there run with this. But I think in the end, since up to this point, there's been no evidence, none whatsoever. And I don't think anything is going to come up from now until.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Two questions. Do you think that Comey was being strategic today for the reasons you've just outlined?
I think he was hedging it a little bit there because, he's got to say that there is an investigation. He's giving them, they can take with that and infer from it what they will. And we all know what the left and the media will infer from that. But I think he's keeping it close because, again, they talked about the leaks being an important thing and something he would like to see.
Let me be specific. Do you think Comey did what he did today to suck the Democrats into a trick? Because that's basically what you're suggesting is going on.
I don't know that he did it for that sole purpose, but if that's what happens on it, that falls on the Democrats for looking at it in that light.
Well, look, what you say sounds hopeful, sounds intriguing, sounds good. Here's my problem with it. I don't see an end to this. You seem convinced that Comey's going to someday announce the investigation's over, and that when he does that, he's going to officially confirm no evidence, we haven't found anything, and that everybody's going to have egg on their face. What if that doesn't happen for 2 years? What if we go into the 2018 midterms with this investigation open, and you add 2 years of innuendo to today that there was collusion, and this investigation is so serious, and it must be so massive, it's going on for 2 years, there must be so much to learn. I can write a bunch of narratives about a 2-year investigation that nail Trump without any evidence. The longer this goes on, the worse it is, if you ask me. But you think it's got a positive end. But for whom? We're never going to convince these left-wing rabid lunatics. No matter what Comey says, no matter what, if Obama were to come out and say, sorry, nothing there, they're not going to believe it. They're going to think game rigged because their expectations have been built up so high. They already think Trump's guilty and it's just a matter of time before he's impeached. So the people that are at stake here are Trump voters and people that voted for Trump that didn't particularly like him but really didn't like Hillary. The longer this goes, the taint and the stain stays and maybe even grows. So how long do you think it's going to be before Comey comes out and says, end of the investigation, nothing here?
Well, I would think that that's going to take place within the next few months. If this has been going on since July, I don't anticipate that it's going to, because it's a finite set of time up until the election is what we're looking at. So there's only so much information in that time frame. So I think they're going to, if they haven't already accumulated that information and now they're sifting through it and verifying it, I don't think there's going to be anything new that will come out or that they will find. But I think in the meantime, if Trump keeps moving forward with his agenda, let the rabid left go on about this. When the economy continues to hum or improves, as we get health care squared away, the immigration issue squared away, some of our trade deals squared away, and along with the tax reform coming up this spring, I think that is going to be a bigger point than people still holding on to this.
Okay, I appreciate it. I would love to ask you more here on your thoughts. I got to go. I'm up against it here on time. But, Jerry, thanks for the call. I about the Trump agenda and some of the other things you just mentioned, I do have some points to add, but I got to do it when we get back. So Trump's approval rating is an all-time new low at 37% right now. Yet, according to other polls and the stock market, the majority of Americans seem to be newly optimistic about the country and the economy and suddenly think we're on the right track. So Trump's approval seems to be the mirror opposite of what pertained under Obama. Obama got great approval ratings while the country was tanking. Now the country is reviving, storming ahead, is evidenced by our optimistic Trump caller and his approvals at 37. Something's wrong with these pictures. But that's as far as I'll go. But the Trump optimist view of this, I find fascinating. And so much so that I'm going to make a note to myself. Well, I'll tell Siri, I can't say this too loud, to remind me. Because it's a fascinating take. This investigation, though, the idea that it's going to end and the Democrats are going to have egg on their faces and that Comey is going to be the instrument of that. Forgive me if I have my doubts. I'd love to be surprised to be wrong. But I'd love it if this is a Democrat setup. That's not what the caller said, but it's where he was hit. Well, I don't know whose side Comey's on. I don't know that Comey ought not be on a side. I mean, if you look at his job in a clearly in a vacuum, he shouldn't be on a side. But he certainly got into a lot of politics today. I've never heard an FBI director outside of Hoover, and Hoover didn't do it officially, get into politics, political analysis the way Comey did today. Anyway, folks, this is the time of year for spring breaks. Screwal vacations. Lots of families taking vacations. Lots of opportunities for home break-ins. That's when your house is broken into, by the way, in the daytime when you're not there. Not at nighttime when you're asleep. That's when it always happens on TV shows. You're asleep, you hear a noise, a thud, you get up. Dad grabs a gun, shoots the burglar. Dad goes to jail. The burglar hits when you're not there. An unoccupied home that's not protected with a home security system, that's the best target for a burglar. Now if that's you, you can change that, and you can change that immediately. Simply Safe Home Security is an option you should consider. Simply Safe systems, easy to set up, easy to use, just as easy to monitor whenever you're away from home and traveling. And that's because the Simply Safe system is built on brand new technology. You can check it on your computer, on your phone. You can reassure yourself the system's alarmed, that your home is secure, nobody's broken in. Simply Safe set out years ago to make a system that works with Wi-Fi and cellular. Specifically no wires, so nobody can cut wires and thereby kill your system. Every part of the system in your house uses Wi-Fi to connect together and secure the perimeter of your home. And when you activate the Simply Safe monitoring service, that connects to the police and fire authorities in the area, again, using cell phone connections. And if somebody cuts the phone line to your vacant home, it won't matter because you're not using it. Whether you're home or away, make your home secure with a Simply Safe system. You go online and scope it out, see what you want, determine the number of doors and windows that you want sensors on, then determine how many motion detectors you want. And if you want any sensors that detect breaking glass as in a window being, and get an HD camera or two. And then you install all this in an hour, certainly in an afternoon. And that base station that communicates to cops, that's something you choose to do if you want for only $14.99 a month with no contract. So if you don't have home security, and you don't because it's prohibitively expensive, go to simplysafeusa.com and look at what they have. And if you buy, using that website will get you 10% off the purchase. simplysafeusa.com.